Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Daily Objective. Today, we're going to be talking about a situation taking place in the United Kingdom, Extinction Rebellion. We've spoken about them. We've had episodes about them before on the show. These guys, they just don't like the world the way it is. Well, let's just say they like the world the way it was before human beings showed up. That's kind of the message I get from them. They like the world the way it was. So in a sense, that makes them the ultimate conservatives, doesn't it? Ironically enough, I'll stop waxing poetic here and move along with the story. So they're blocking traffic. They're acting a fool. And let me tell you, those police in the UK, they took their nightsticks and they said, oh, let us see how we can help facilitate the situation. And of course, these Extinction Rebellion, these leftists, these nihilist egalitarians, they are the establishment. They are not rebelling, ironically enough. They're it. They made it. They've been the establishment of the academic world for probably a couple centuries or so, depending where you start counting it to be the case. But certainly at a societal, at a sort of an institutional level, I think you could say since the 1960s, they've been penetrating all civilized countries, and the hippies have taken over. Enjoy it. Anyway, we're going to talk about who's the police even on, whose side is the police even on? And let me tell you, they've got an actor on their team, the guy from Game of Thrones who hung out with Tyrion the little person for most of the series. That cool guy I used to think was cool. He's participating in this shenanigan. Well, we've got an actor on our side too. Please welcome Mark Pellegrino.
What's up?
Not much. Do with my usual level of research, kind of trying to pick up bits and pieces of what I heard about this whole thing. Headline says Extinction Rebellion blocks busy junction in London. You know, people don't think about what that means to block traffic. Literally, lives are going to end, which I know Extinction Rebellion, it's in the name. They might not mind people dying, but literally, when you have emergencies or just you're conducting business, you're trying to get to work, you're trying to make appointments. No, hey, don't worry about it. Extinction Rebellion needs this street right now. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, that's the narcissism of this system that we've built up, where people think political rights, the right to freely assemble, means assembling in the streets, which are for passage for people to get from point A to point B. And I'm sorry, that is not the case. Free assembly means you can rent a hall or a park and go there and assemble and petition your government and protest all you want, but you can't stop me from going to work. You can't stop me from going to the hospital to visit my mother or my kids. You can't stop me from going to the grocery store. And so the idea that they have a right that conflicts with my right is itself a contradiction.
Yeah, and the more bananas the leftists go, and the more we try to offer capitalism as the political system that'll definitely help keep some of these wackos at bay, we are met with resistance from conservatives, from centrists, whatever they are, who say, no, we can't have complete laissez-faire. Well, who's going to pave the roads? What about the roads? Literally, the roads, if privatized, would keep these wackos off of it so I can go to work.
Well, it's not even like we don't have a precedent for that. I mean, for the first 100 or so years of our republic, roads, bridges, locks, waterways, they were all built by private companies, and the capital was privately raised. They don't need we don't need the government for infrastructure. If the failing infrastructure isn't enough of a proof, we have 100 years or more of private enterprise doing a better job.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. It's, I think Peikoff compared it to people in the Soviet Union saying, well, we can't do it with communism. Who's going to give us the bread? Like we're going to have all these people standing in line and no bread at the front of the line. It's absolutely insane. I mean, what's going to stop one bread company from just buying all the competitors and charging $1 million a loaf? That's what people would say. I mean, the roads make perfect sense to me. The airspace can get a little bit more difficult to imagine because it's like 3D chess compared to roads, but still it would be very possible with with legal scholars taking the issue seriously, as well as private interests putting their money towards what it is they're willing to invest in. Got a couple super chats right off the bat. Mary Aline with 149 and a picture of a peach. Thank you. That bright lifts up my spirits in the midst of all this nihilistic filth. Phil with £5 says, Mark, what point has to be reached for an objectivist politicians to make sense of the electorate in the glibly described free world?
What?
Phil's questions are a work of art. It's always like, I mean, we need to have Lisa Van Dam in here to go through his super chats. He's asking
abstract art.
I prefer to call it poetry. He says, what point has to be reached for an objectivist politician to make sense to the electorate in today's landscape?
Well, I think we need a cultural revolution.
And
that's not for a few generations yet, but I think we're starting it right now.
Yeah, and you started a political party in the U.S., the Capitalist Party, despite the reality that the country's not ready for a president, but maybe at the local level, or maybe just having a Capitalist Party candidate on the scene will help influence the dialogue. So
eventually, that's true.
Mm-hmm. Kathleen with £2 says, just for Rozzi calling Extinction Rebellion spoiled brats. Sammy's bored again with 99 pence and a unicorn. Jonathan Honig with $9.99 American says, thank you. No, thank you. And Sammy's bored again with a banana and 99 pence. Jonathan Honig is back with $4.99 and some hippopotamuses. You know, hippopotamuses will inherit the earth if Extinction Rebellion have their way. Now, people think, oh, you're exaggerating. The left is not as bad as you say. I mean, not everyone who is not, you know, on the right, let's say, like a lot of people maybe lean left. They're not as bad as you might think. But Extinction Rebellion, they're like as explicit as they can be. These people are absolutely insane. They've been labeled, quote, an extremist ideology by the terrorist police. Producer behind the scene, Dylan, is saying he doesn't see any terrorist acts in their history, but they have been labeled as an extremist ideology by the terrorist police, for what that's worth.
How do we convince people that this libertine idea of liberty doesn't really apply? That the right to assemble doesn't mean you have the right to stand in the streets and block traffic? How do we get people to understand that blocking traffic is an infringement on the rights of other people, and no rights conflict in that way? No proper rights conflict in that way. How do we convince them of that? Because the Extinction Rebellion, you know, they get violent when they're being thrown off public streets because they think their political rights are being abused, which is not true. But I would say 85 to 90% of the population believes that they do, in fact, have a right to parade through the streets like that and prevent you from going from point A to point B.
Yeah, well, this is what we get with such an anti-concept as public property, don't we? I mean, private property by definition is not public. Public is just a concept. It's not, that I'm not sure it refers to anything in reality. I mean, it's a useful word at times, but there is no actual public. There is only a sum of individuals, and property can only be owned by an individual or by a corporation or cooperation of various individuals. Public property is an oxymoron, and when we accept public property in our vocabulary and we actually treat it like a legal reality, we end up cheapening the concept of property to the point where your actual property as a private citizen is regulated, it's violated. We actually are losing actual legitimate property the more we respect the fake public property. And you can see what we now have. This is science fiction, to have a bunch of basically anti-civilizational brats and nihilists blocking traffic, doing whatever it is their feelings are pulling them to do, and to actually have the police, whose job it is to protect the rights of individuals, aiding and abetting these nut jobs. God help us all. And Dylan behind the scenes says that Extinction Rebellion have grown violent when police actually try to remove them from the road. So 90 were arrested last September. Well, that's probably going to change. I mean, the more they stand their ground, I hate to say it, but this is true. The more people express moral certainty, the more people end up respecting them, because the shaky, pragmatist, altruist, centrist skeptics are no match for extremist environmentalists or Muslim extremists. You can't beat extremists and people with moral righteousness by countering it with skepticism and sort of this apologetic pragmatism of like, hey, just come on, let's go with the status quo. No. That's not going to tame them. That's not going to calm them down. And they have the moral high ground. So history repeats itself, we've seen. Saudi Arabia at one point was just a family of playboys that ran the country. Like, they were basically given Saudi Arabia, I think, by the British or by the League of Nations or someone. So Saudi Arabia was just a family of oil playboys or something. They obviously stole the oil, but just a lucky family that had it handed to them. And then the Muslims started to rise up and say, what is it? Is this a Muslim country or not? Aren't you Muslims? And the Saudi family was like, yeah, of course we are. And next thing you know, the Sharia law, moral police, and Saudi Arabia is one of the worst places to live, as you cannot be secular. You cannot live the life that you want. It's one of the worst theocracies there are, because the people who claimed the moral high ground stood up. And, jumping over to the West, we see the environmentalists with a lot of moral fervor. They're asking us, don't you believe in saving the planet? And people are like, yeah, of course I do. Yeah, what do you guys want? You want the roads here? Yeah, block them.
Well, time to start. No, I won't say it. I was going to say something that might get me in trouble.
Don't say that. Not around here. Marilyn with $4 and a little emoji thing holding up a cup of coffee. Sammy's bored again with a banana peel and 99 pence. Yeah. So now, Mark, you are formerly an environmentalist, isn't that right? One of your interviews says, like, from environmentalist to objectivist. That's the title.
Yeah.
So these people, and as do I. I was definitely in that mindset in my teens before reading Ayn Rand, but I was never an adult environmentalist. So I can't relate to actually being a coherent member of society as an environmentalist. I mean, so you understand these people. You know the enemy. What do you know?
Well, I know that even growing up in the 70s, when the environmentalist indoctrination was beginning, that it saturated me and became almost, it felt like an inherent part of my being. It felt like common sense to sort of go in this direction. It took a lot of thinking to get me out of it. I can't even imagine what kids go through now. I mean, they're inundated from kindergarten on with much more intense indoctrination than I ever received. So it's a lot harder to get it out of their system than it was for me. But I was certainly animated by a humans are a cancer that need to be removed from the earth kind of mentality, which isn't foreign to them. I mean, I think Paul Ehrlich has said something to that in the very same vein. I think the head of Greenpeace at one time said the very same thing. There's nothing about an environmentalist that likes human action or human life. They use it as a convenient tool to advance their agenda, but in the end, their agenda is to eliminate human influence on the environment. So it's very, very anti-life. And once you see that, you can't unsee it, but it takes a long time for that information to penetrate.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite show at one point as a kid was Captain Planet. I used to look forward to it being on once a week. It was my favorite show. Earth, fire, wind, water, heart. When all your powers combine, I am Captain Planet. That was I know it by heart to this very day, but they are Earth, fire, wind, water, and then heart was one of them, like one of the superpowers, heart. And it could make a rabid dog sympathetic. That was.
But those are the ancient elements, aren't they? So it's like they're hearkening back to an old time, pre-scientific time.
Most definitely. They are the anti-industrial revolution, as Ayn Rand so eloquently put it. Enric in the chat is saying the Orthodox Islamists in Saudi Arabia started in the 1800s. The royal family has had a devil's deal with them since the start of their oil wealth. Okay, maybe I misread history, but my understanding was around the 1970s or something like that. So not far from the time that Iran became what it became. The Saudis also went from being just kind of a dictatorship to becoming a theocracy. But maybe I misremember what I heard or whatever it is. So we want you all to investigate. Maybe we'll have a Middle East expert on the show.
Now the royal family rents out other places to carry out their debaucheries. When I was working in Tangier on Beirut, the royal family was fixing up the boardwalk of Tangier for one of their prince's weddings. And apparently they go there and spend lavish amounts of money on hookers and booze and all the things they're not supposed to do in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, that's what I've heard, that the Saudi family, basically, if your proximity in blood to the royalty is your status in Saudi Arabia. So it's absolutely how you're a birthright. You know, you're born a peasant, you'll be a peasant. And the rich, powerful, they love to party behind closed doors and overseas abroad. And so that must have been quite the surreal experience to be working in that type of place. I've never been to a dictatorship or to any kind of scary, you know, potentially like a place where I could potentially be arrested and imprisoned indefinitely. I've never traveled to those types of places.
Yeah, you don't get that feeling with Tangier, but it is a monarchy, and they are governed by Muslim law. So there is that threat of arbitrariness and brutality behind the scenes there. But luckily, I didn't experience it while I was there.
Luckily, yeah. Sounds like a fascinating experience, and it's just so incredible to me that these dictatorships, these theocrats, and the environmentalist dictators, as they're probably going to be, they emerge in a vacuum. They're these parasites. They just kind of crawl and drop into the void that is left open by skepticism, by doubt, by moral uncertainty. All it takes is for the secular egoists to assert themselves, to make their position known and clear. If the intellectuals in the Western universities were to study Ayn Rand, take her seriously, give her a fair shake, and ultimately teach her philosophy, even among others, but certainly teach her philosophy, I mean, all these lunatics would have no chance, because just on the face of it, they're insane. On the face of it, they're full of contradictions, and they're just anti-reality. They're antithetic to people's values. Who wants to live under the Saudi family? Who wants to live under an nihilist environmentalist rule? Who wants to do that when it conflicts with their values? Only people willing to do that are people that have no moral answer to their claims. So it is truly, it's truly simple. Like it's simple and sad how avoidable so many problems in the world are.
But for those damn dirty skeptics.
Yeah, the skeptics. So what are we going to do with them? You want to go fight them? Should we?
I fight them every day on social media. They are a very difficult lot because, of course, they hide behind reason and use reason in an attempt to undo it, and an attempt to undermine your confidence in reason and knowledge. So they're a particularly hideous lot. I mean, the sophisticated ones. The unsophisticated ones are pretty easy to run an end round on, but you can't convince those other folks. Can you? I haven't found one who's got a reasonably high academic certification who will come around to abandoning skepticism for certitude.
Right. I mean, I've basically given up on trying to convince them. You know, like, so they've got a Game of Thrones actor at the Extinction Rebellion protest, and if you look at like the history of philosophy and the landscape of all the various philosophical schools that have developed, it makes Game of Thrones seem easy to follow. It's just like that we've gotten to a point where like skepticism and science are basically married in the way people look at it. Literal opposites. Skepticism rejects certainty, and science is the sort of path to certainty, but the two are married. And if you try to explain to them that, they say, "Oh, no, you're the one who doesn't get it."
Well, that's because they now define scientific knowledge as provisional. and all knowledge is now provisional. So they have a very different point of view than us. I think an objectivist might look at knowledge as, yes, it grows, but we can have contextual certainty. Provisional means to me that even knowledge that you have right now that is impeccably logically acquired can be contradicted by some new information in the future. And we know that it can be added to, that things can sit on top of that base of what you know. They think the whole thing can be obliterated by something new.
Right. And it sounds like you really know a lot about kind of how they present their ideas or what they believe. I think, in a strange way, the skeptics themselves, the fact that the scientific establishment and that a lot of the secular establishment is basically skeptic, that also emerged in a vacuum. So if, let's say, Ayn Rand's philosophy had been entertained when she wrote Atlas Shrugged, or if Ayn Rand had devised it 50 years earlier, 100 years earlier, whatever, if the world had known of and accepted or entertained objectivism much earlier, there's a good chance the world would look much different. And sort of the game now, the battle is to offer objectivism as a secular rational morality, as an alternative both to religion as well as skepticism. I wonder how many people would find objectivism much more attractive and consonant with their values. Today, skepticism has the prestige of, so many prominent intellectuals, but the more that changes, the more prominent intellectuals either are objectivists or respect Ayn Rand, there's a good chance of seeing that change. So
all you have to do is put those intellectuals up against a solid objectivist, a Greg Salieri, an Onkar Ghate, Aaron Smith, and they'll be exposed. They can dance rings around their captive audience students because their students don't have context and they don't have life experience. But even people like us who are lay objectivists, who are on the fringes of knowledge, so to speak, we know a lot, but we don't know anything like our teachers. We can beat these folks up. I've had tons of arguments with academics, and they're not that special. And if anything, they've disarmed their reasoning capability in school. And it's oftentimes like beating up on a kindergartner. I know that sounds strange because the person you're talking to has a PhD, but things that are evident to a 4-year-old are no longer evident to them. And you can make that very plain to the people who are watching the argument. The person you're arguing with will not see it, but other people will.
Yeah, and in the chat room, my good friend Hugh James says, yes, of course, we need yet another religion. I think he's implying that objectivism is just another, extremist, dogmatic religion. And this is what skepticism does to people. This is what they're like. They reject everything, including the truth. So skepticism is like this self-eating.
They conflate certitude with dogma.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks,
and then they end up trying to sell you actual religion by saying, hey, look, you've got to believe something. So here's certainty, so to speak, or here's by faith. We really just mean certainty. Marilyn with $10 says, I don't think I bought into the BS, but nothing made sense. In 1971, I read Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal and thought, oh my God, there are answers. I was born in 1953, so it wasn't as bad as it is today. Well, couldn't have been as bad, but it was sort of like the heart of the battle. It's sort of like if it was Game of Thrones, it's like, season 1 climax type shit happening with, the rise of the environmentalists as Marilyn was growing up. At the end of the day, I have found that debate and polemics are wonderful, but the ultimate battle is not even a battle. The ultimate success, the ultimate victory is just in sort of presenting something positive as its own sort of self-contained messaging, its own gift, its own lesson. That's ultimately what I think is going to change the world, which is why you don't see that many objectivists debating so much. You don't see that many philosophers going out and going for the jugulars. They're mostly just presenting, here's objectivism, here's what Ayn Rand says, here's how I understand Ayn Rand. At the end of the day, I do believe, like you look at Ayn Rand herself, her art drew in many more people than her, her polemics and her, her criticisms of the culture. So at the end of the day, it is about positivity. And speaking of positive, Sammy with 99 pence sent us a picture of a hamburger. Thank you. Thank you.
Yummy.
All right. I guess we can jump over to Clubhouse. Phil, hold on. Phil with 10 pounds says, just imagine if some British police forces painted their cars rainbow colors. They are. Is it time to say enough already? I don't know if Phil's been to West Hollywood, but, rainbows are on cars. That's not necessarily to say that, I'd much rather see rainbows on a police car than, I don't know, like some sort of environmental, like a peace sign or some kind of environmentalist imagery. That to me is scary, environmentalism. The rainbow to me just kind of says this is a largely gay area and people don't really understand the purpose of police. So they're painting their cars instead of just going to work. That's how I interpret that. But yes, Phil, it is time to say enough already because you've got the police helping Extinction Rebellion over there. So what are you going to do? What are we going to do? We're going to jump over to Clubhouse. Thank you, everybody, for the super chats. Sammy's board again with the last minute rainbow super chat at 99 pence. Thank you, everybody, for the super chats. Thank you, Marilyn, for the $2. They're not letting us end the show. $2, she says, not just positivity, but clarity. Exactly right. Thank you, everybody, for the super chats. Jesus Christ, can we end the show? Jumping over to Clubhouse. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
And I guess see you back later today, everybody. I don't have any notes, but I think Harry Binswanger is normally on Mondays. So that's coming up later today, unless I'm incorrect. And next week, the Objectivist conference is taking place, which may prevent Harry Binswanger from doing his usual show. It'll probably prevent Yaron Brook from doing his usual debate series. So stay tuned for more announcements on next week's scheduling. But yes, coming up today at 3 o'clock UK time. 3 o'clock UK time? That can't be right. Maybe 3 o'clock Eastern time. 3 o'clock Eastern time. Yes, that's it. 8 o'clock UK time. HBTV. Harry Binswanger is going to be showing the left who's boss once and for all, or whatever it is he's going to be talking about. Looking forward to that. See you all back here then. See you on Clubhouse momentarily. Thank you, Mark, for sitting through this very long outro. And goodbye.
And scene.